with my special guest, Bill Koenig, who has been in the White House press corps for about 16 years. Frequent guest on this program, also to my conference activity. And we have foreign affairs exploding literally around the world. We'll talk about some of those. We have some issues right here at home with the new administration. Want to talk about those as well. Bill Koenig writes this: the times we are living in are breathtaking. There are new significant news stories every week. Moreover, they are multidimensional, complex, and complicated with far-reaching implications. He says, as I documented in a recent news report, we are living in times of much chaos and disorder. However, as believers in Jesus Christ, we are blessed to have a much greater understanding of the times and the eternal hope that helps us cope with these times. We'll give contact information a little bit later. Eric Barger joins me in studio as my co-host. And Bill, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Jan. Always great to be with you all.
Bill, how has the press corps changed for you? I mean, we talked the other day, and you're still dealing with a multitude of very liberal reporters there in Washington. But has anything changed?
Oh, this is much more combative. It's much more confrontational. What's interesting is the major networks, TV networks, are in the front row, along with Reuters and Associated Press. And on the second row is Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Washington Post, the major U.S. newspapers, and those are usually the most confrontational rows. And Sean Spicer, from the beginning, has worked the room. I mean, one of the first people he called on was CBN, which was just great, as well as even in press conferences. President Trump called on CBN, and CBN's had greater access with the Trump White House than they had during 8 years of President George W. Bush. It's been tremendous from a Christian perspective. So interesting is you get some really good questions from the back rows and moving the questions around, and then you come back that front two rows and it's confrontational. And what was this said to this Russian, and what about this Russian? What about this comment? What about this administration person? What about this nomination process? Oh, it's just, I think people are so fed up with it. But I happened to read an article today, matter of fact, that the Media Research Center said that 89% of the major topics since Trump has taken office, just right around 100 days, has been negative. There's been 1,501 negative statements and 186 positive statements. They are doing everything they can, Jan, to sabotage and do everything they can to disrupt this presidency and to make it as ineffective as possible. And unfortunately, not all of America gets their news from conservative sources. As a matter of fact, most news sources today in America, 85 to 90%, are to the left and are opposed to our conservative values.
You told me that they remain in total disbelief that, first of all, Donald Trump is systematically undoing 8 years of Obama policy in just a few months, and that they continue to be stunned.
Oh, absolutely. I think that they're still absolutely shocked. I happened to watch this the other night, the final moments, when they were finding out, that there's a possibility around, I think it's around 9:30, 9:40 on election night when Chris Wallace with Fox, I'll never forget this, said, there's a chance that Trump might win this. And then Brit Hume chimed in, and Brett Baer, and then all of a sudden CNN picked up on this, and then MSNBC picked on this. So for the next few hours, the discussion was, Trump might pull this off, and then that state, Florida, looks good, and then North Carolina looks good. Oh my gosh, not Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin. So, and then it built up to about, I think it was 2:30, 2:40 when Hillary Clinton officially conceded. They were shocked then, and they're shocked even to this day. And now that they are seeing all these things that were so popular with them that Obama had put in place being dismantled one by one, it's becoming even more problematic and difficult for them.
Bill, I wonder if we'll ever be able to get back to having news gatherers be news gatherers. Do you think that's going to be a possibility? I mean, Huntley Brinkley, we may not have agreed with everything, but they reported that even Cronkite in those days. I guess I'm portraying my age here, but will the news ever be news again, or will it always be making the news by themselves?
I'm afraid you're right, Eric. I don't think it's ever going to change. One of the discussions was not televising the daily press briefings, which is fairly new. It started pretty much during George W. Bush's time, a little bit toward the end of Clinton's time. But, it's been a daily press briefing, and, the gotcha questions are, headline news for the national newscasts or front-page news articles in major newspapers like New York Times, Washington Post, Chicago Tribune, LA Times. It's just the whole dynamics have changed, and the bias that we've seen is never been worse. It's all a turf war. And I think with that in mind, the leftist, secular, humanist, God-haters, unfortunately in many cases, they are so committed to their agenda that they cannot receive or even process truth. I think we've discussed this before on your program, that it just gets to the point is, how do you conclude that based on what you just heard this way? I mean, how do you think that? I mean, you just are not hearing truth for truth. And there's been some debate and discussion over is, truth a thing of the past? Can I just say something and will my comments, speaking liberal, will the end justify the means? And the age of truth doesn't matter is, unfortunately, I think, is a period of time that we're living in. And I don't think it's going to improve, Eric. I just don't. And just because of confrontational nature and the fact that we have such a significant turf war going on right now.
Bill, you and I talked about some of the opposition that's going on right now to the new agenda, a bit of a more conservative agenda, and what a threat this is. George Soros to the Obamas, to Obama's crony Valerie Jarrett, to the ACLU, to the Southern Poverty Law Center, and you even said to me privately that President Trump's life is in danger from, you name it, the globalists, the cartels in Mexico, the Russians, the Iranians, ISIS, and he may have a divine covering, but he has to have our prayers. And someone, if not, someone will try to take him out and possibly even succeed.
Yeah, the prayer is crucial, Jan, absolutely crucial. And I also do believe he has divine covering, as well as some of our other Christian leaders that are very outspoken about the threats of America, like Franklin Graham and others. I believe they have a divine covering, a supernatural covering. And I think that that's the same thing with President Trump. I mean, he is disrupting a lot of the old foundational things of the one world order, the globalists, the George Soros, as you mentioned, this list. So he sincerely, as well as he and Mike Pence and his administration need our continuous prayers for their safety and security. Mm-hmm. I think it's crucial that they continue to have that, as well as people that are leaders of our country in all different facets, whether it's on state or on the national level.
We're called to do that too.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Called to that, Eric, but I think we're even in a much more serious time, so we need to be more serious about doing that.
You're listening to Understanding the Times Radio. I'm Jan Markell. I have on the line Bill Koenig. He served in the White House Press Corps for a number of years here. Started working with Bill back in 2002. And Eric Barger's in studio as a co-host today. Bill, I saw a headline here recently. Making America Great Again is only possible without liberals lurking in the administration. And there's a lot of talk right now about Jared Trump and Ivanka Trump. They're liberal New York Democrats, and they have huge influence over Donald Trump. At the same time, there is concern that the Steve Bannons and the like may be being pushed out. Mike Pence certainly can't be pushed out, but others could be. So is there some truth to this?
Well, I think that you have the domestic and the international. On the domestic, obviously, Jared Kushner and his wife, Ivanka, and Donald Trump's daughter have a lot of influence, especially on some of the social issues. They're very smart, very talented, very capable, and I got to give them credit as well as Trump's sons. They were very, very high in Mike Pence as the vice president. President Trump was considering Chris Christie and others, but they were really high in Pence, and I give them a lot of credit because that was probably President Trump's best selection. Best decision was selecting Mike Pence as a devout Christian as his running mate. I give them a lot of credit for that, but I think what affects a lot of Christians is the LGBT and marriage agenda, and with Kushner's background from New York City, Manhattan, and a more of a liberal bent, despite the fact that they are considered Orthodox, or Kushner's Orthodox Jew, they've been very favorable in protecting some of the things that President Obama put in place at the State Department and within labor and other things like that. So they've been defensive and defending that, where other conservative evangelical members of President Trump's cabinet cabinet as well as the vice president have been more favorable in eliminating some of those decisions that President Obama made. So, this is another area that we need to continue to pray, because this is another very divisive issue. Mm-hmm. It was divisive during the Senate hearings of President Trump's evangelical cabinet selections, and it will continue to be so. Other than that, I think they're very solid.
I want to build just a little bit on what you're saying, and to my audience, a heads up here that I want to play a soundbite I've played before. I played this short clip of Monica Crowley when I had Michelle Bachmann and Phil Haney in studio a couple months ago, because, Bill, you used the term to me the other day on the phone that there's an atmosphere almost like a civil war going on in Washington, and the pushback is just unbelievable. And I think Monica Crowley sums it up fairly well in this little short soundbite, and then I want your perspective on what you hear.
There is a very dangerous and very effective destabilization campaign underway against this president, his administration, and his agenda. And what I hope that the president and his senior aides understand is that these forces are not just looking to delegitimize him. We often talk about that. Sure, they want to do that. They want to personally destroy him, destroy his presidency, and they would like to see the man in prison. I hope that the president understands. I am not overstating this, having been a victim of this myself. They are out for blood. And the reason they have to destroy him is that Donald Trump is an alien organism that has been injected into the body politic by the American people to reform it. He must not be allowed to succeed. They have swarmed him. They have swarmed everybody around him in order to reject him out of the system, just like any alien organism. He must not be allowed to succeed. And I hope that everybody around him now understands that this is a war and that they started a long time ago, but they will not end until they get the president of the United States. And they want him in prison. And this is what we need to understand.
So true.
David Brock and some of these organizations have already raised tens of millions of dollars for an impeachment process. Then they want jail to the chief. They need to understand that this is a war. We are so far beyond normal politics, Sean. We are in a very dangerous moment.
Bill Koenig, is that an overstatement?
No, I thought it was very well communicated. No.
Not overstated.
No. I'm around this day in, day out, Jan, so I am not desensitized, but I'm around this day in, day out, and I see it. But Monica Crowley did a very, very good job of explaining the depth of this agenda. I don't think we've heard it communicated anywhere near as well as her communication in that clip. And, that's just pretty much bottom line. When you have George Soros, within a few days of the election, have some of his major money people come into Washington, D.C. at the Meridian Hotel for 48 hours of regrouping and powwowing on what to do next, gives you a good example. Or the fact that the ACLU was able to raise $29 million in November, December to confront and stand up against the Trump agenda. On and on and on. The 500,000 women supposedly that came out from across the country the day after the inauguration. It's been a little quiet right now. We see some incidents, but underneath the surface, there's a lot going on.
To hear the media tell it, you would think that there's nobody in the White House with an IQ over 15. It's pretty incredible. And with the media's help, it appears to me that they have everything in place, especially with the money they have. But, the big question is, Bill, will Trump be stopped as we look at it today? I think he knows what is going on. He's aware. He's got very, very thick skin. We see that. But what grounds do they have? He's outing everybody that has held America hostage over the last few years. If Jay Sekulo's lawsuit against the IRS comes through, they'll have the names, they'll have the people, they'll know who went after the conservative groups. You think about it, could Trump be stopped? That's the big question.
Well, I think part of what we've seen on Capitol Hill, Chuck Schumer and the people in the Senate have delaying every possible nomination they could during the cabinet hearings. There's a lot more people that need to be confirmed. I read just recently that no U.S. attorneys have been selected to replace Obama's U.S. attorneys, and typically they just kind of transition out, but there was some concerns about the leaks and other things that were taking place, so those U.S. attorneys were asked to put in their resignation letters. It's a disruption. Pelosi, Maxine Waters, other people that say these salacious things about Trump and his administration, it just continues. And you get to a point where It's disruptive. It's sabotaging the agenda. And another thing is, this is a total discredit to the American voters. I mean, Trump was selected. He was selected, overwhelmingly. The Republicans control the House. They control the Senate. The Democrats have lost 1,000 seats, and they're still in denial about that. During Obama's 8 years in office, I mean, Obama rode off in the sunset like he was victorious.